What is up, boys and girls? Lundrick here, and now I'm back. A bit earlier than I anticipated, but here it is. The Wrestling in 1997 Q&A session. Put this out about a week and a half ago. Got some responses. So I'm going to do this, and I think now this is the direction the Q&As are going to go in, like, of a certain year and all that type of thing. Don't know exactly how often I'll do it, but plan, hopefully, I'll try to do it at least once a month. So yeah, so if this one goes well, and then we'll do a couple more in the future and just see how it goes, really. So I've got your questions, and now I'm going to answer them. So first set of questions come from Hitman Fan 8631. Worst/best WWF pay-per-view and worst/best WCW pay-per-view. So let's go first to the WWF. I think the best one's going to be an obvious answer, isn't it? I mean, has to be In Your House Canadian Stampede. That is one of the best WWE pay-per-views of all time. If you haven't seen that pay-per-view before, you've definitely got to watch it. It's just an amazing show. And the worst pay-per-view, probably, I reckon, of the last pay-per-view of the year, In Your House Degeneration X. That was a fucking terrible show, really, wasn't it? A load of shitty finishes. I mean, you had a good main event in Shamrock and Shawn Michaels, but not a great one. Pretty good opener in Taka Michinoku and Brian Christopher, but then you had shit like the DOA versus Los Barriquas, Butterbean versus Mark Mero, and a wink boxing match, you know, the fake boxing match, yeah. What else do we have? Triple H and Sergeant Slaughter was pretty boring. The Outlaws versus Legion of Doom wasn't very good. So yeah, that one really. And then as far as WCW is concerned, for me, I would say the best is Bash of the Beach. I feel like that was a really good pay-per-view. I mean, that was one with Hogan and Rodman versus Luger and the Giant, which was actually a decent match, but you had some nice gems in there, like Chris Jericho, Ultimo Dragon, Chris Benoit, Kevin Sullivan retirement match. Even Flair and Piper was pretty good on that one, to be honest with you. And then worst pay-per-view has to be, oh god, NWO Sold Out. Holy shit, the bed was that terrible. I mean, you had one excellent match with Eddie Guerrero and 6 for the US title, but then you had such shit like Hugh Morris versus Big Bubba Rogers. What do we have? Main event was Hogan Giant. That was bad. I think Medusa, I can't remember half the matches, it was that bad, but yeah, I've reviewed it on the channel as well, so if you want to see how bad NWO Sold Out, check that out. And then we got Bret Hart staying at the WWF until WrestleMania 4 in brackets. I know this was 1998, but whatever, but that's fine, it's relevant in 1997 as well, so I'll accept that. Would the main event have been Bret Hart for Steve Austin for WrestleMania 14? As far as I know, yes. As far as I know, obviously I could be wrong, but as far as I know, that was supposedly the plan for WrestleMania 14. But basically, Bret to be in Shawn's place, or then do Bret and Austin for the main event of WrestleMania 14. Austin finally gets a big win over Bret that he didn't get in 1997. Then I think after that, Bret was probably going to get phased out of the main event scene and into the upper mid-card scene. But yeah, I think so. Then what would you have done to improve the light heavyweight division? Well, one of them is kind of hard to do, because what you got to realise when they've had that light heavyweight division, who was the best light heavyweight talent in the business at the time? When you think light heavyweight cruiserweight talent of the 1997, you think Dean Malenko, Chris Jericho, Rey Mysterio, Eddie Guerrero, Ultimo Dragon, Psychosis, Juventud Guerrera, those guys. Problem was, where were those guys in WCW? So WWE had a couple of good guys like Taka Michinoku, Brian Christopher, even Ogula, but the problem was they just weren't Guerreros, they weren't Malenkos, they weren't Jerichos. So although they could have done some better talent recruitment, I mean, for example, Jerry Lynn could have came at the WWF and had a run. Tajiri was around at that time, could have had a run. I think Kid Cash was an independent wrestler at the time as well, so guys like him could have came in. think Super Crazy was wrestling at the time, so those are the sort of talents you could have brought in. Not sure who else was around at the time. I mean, it was a long time ago now. So yeah, try and get the best talent you can get, and then take the division seriously. Like, give it credible matches, credible feuds. Don't just throw it out there for 2 or 3 minutes on Raw. Don't just have a pay-per-view match just for the hell of it. Actually take it seriously, like WCW did with the Cruiserweight division. That's the problem every time WWE's tried a light heavyweight cruiserweight division. They haven't took it seriously. I mean, yeah, the one they got now is doing better, but first few months of it was utter shit, to be honest with you. So yeah, that's all you can do really. Actually take it seriously and just try and get the best talent you can. For really, there we go. Do you think this was Bret Hart's best year? IMO 94, 1997 was his best. For me personally, I always favour 1994. I always liked his run in 1994 better. But I agree with your sentiment that 1994 and 1997 are his best 2 years. But me personally, I always go with 1994 because I love that run as a top face, a feud with Owen Hart, the match of the 1-2-3 Kid. Even the feud with Bob Backlund was pretty good, to be fair. So, yeah, match of Diesel at the King of the Ring. So, me personally, I always favour 1994. And what's the last question? What was better, WrestleMania 13 or Starrcade 1997? Now, ironically, for a year with companies being hot, the biggest show of the years were bad. I mean, let's face it, WrestleMania 13 was not a good show. I mean, it was a pretty mediocre show, saved by an absolute classic between Bret Hart and Steve Austin. Starrcade 1997 was a humongous letdown after such an epic build for Hogan and Sting. That all went to shit, but even the undercard was pretty bad, to be honest. I mean, there wasn't many good matches on the undercard. I think the best match was probably Malenko versus Guerrero for the opener for the Cruiserweight title. So I would say, on the virtue of Bret Hart and Austin being so amazing, pretty much saving the show, I'll probably slightly go with WrestleMania 13 over Starrcade 1997, but neither show's particularly good, to be honest with you. Then we got next set of questions. Honorub Sediate, was Hollywood Hogan the best world champion in 1997? Yes, he was. And people don't be like, oh, but he had crappy matches with Roddy Piper and fucking all those guys. His matches sucked. Yeah, his matches weren't great, but for what the job of the world champion was, to create interest, to get heat and to draw money, Hogan in 1997 was amazing. I mean, it was amazing watching him in 1997 after being a huge babyface for all those years. Now he was Hollywood Hogan, the big heel. Facts are, Hogan drew ratings and drew money, and that's what matters. I mean, his matches with Piper, yes, all those matches with Piper were dreadful wrestling matches. Drew money. I mean, his match with Luger, where he lost the title, drew a big rating. And obviously the match with Sting, I mean, let's be honest, even though the buy rate wasn't good, I mean, although the match wasn't good, the buy rate was phenomenal. 650,000 buys. So yeah, I would definitely say, you can even make a case for, let's just say WCW, not NWA, but WCW. So let's say from 1991 when it became the WCW Championship, make it argue for Hollywood Hogan being the best WCW champion of all time, in my opinion, which is one of the reasons I consider him the greatest of all time, because for me he was the greatest WWF champion of all time, and he may well have been the greatest WCW champion of all time as well. So yeah, then what have we got now? He's a good. Which was the better performer of the year, Bret Hart, Eddie Guerrero? I would say Bret Hart just. I mean, Eddie Guerrero was great, don't get me wrong, and he had that amazing match with Rey Mysterio, but Bret Hart was. These are some of the Bret Hart's great matches that year. Part of the Final Four match in Final Four. Amazing match with Austin, WrestleMania 13. Amazing match with Austin, not amazing match, but a great match with Austin at Revenge of the Taker. Big part of the Canadian Stampede main event. Then 2 great matches with The Undertaker at SummerSlam and One Night Only. So I'll probably go with Bret Hart for that one. Possibly being biased, I'll admit, but that's me. Then what do we have here? Would you call DDP Savage Feud the WCW equivalent of the Bret and Austin feud? Yeah, I would say that's a fair comparison. I mean, there was a lot of similarities to it. The hatred that they seem to have for each other, the great brawls and all that. And another one was the established guy making the young. Well, DDP wasn't young as such, but you know what I mean, like young in terms of how long he'd been in the business. I mean, DDP was actually not that much younger than Savage at the time, but obviously you have Bret in the WWF, big established legend. Savage in WCW, big established legend. Then obviously in WWF side you have Stone Cold, the up and coming superstar, and then DDP in WCW, the up and coming superstar. So yeah, I would say it's pretty much the similar feuds. What have we got? Which year do you feel Undertaker got the most character development, 1996 or 1997? 1997, I mean, for 1996, did he really have some great character development? Not really. I mean, I would say that was more of an in-ring development in 1996. I mean, his in-ring style changed in 1996 to a more faster, aggressive pace, but the character was more or less the same. Whereas 1997, yeah, he had his whole backstory started being told. Obviously, it started after he won the title, and then Paul Bearer blackmailed him into becoming his manager again. And then the whole thing emerging about the fire at the funeral home 20 years earlier, which resulted in the death of his parents and what he thought was Kane. I mean, that showed a more human side of the Undertaker, that yes, Undertaker has a family, Undertaker has a past, Undertaker has problems like everybody else, and then obviously the whole story of Kane actually being alive and then coming for revenge on his brother. And towards the end of the year, how Undertaker was trying to be humble and refusing to fight his own brother. I mean, sure, a lot of people can relate to that. I mean, sure, most brothers, but especially older brothers, if they had a problem with the younger brother, wouldn't want to fight him. So yeah, I feel like 1997 was the year Undertaker's character got a bit more depth to it, pretty much down with that storyline. I mean, God knows I could talk about the Undertaker-Kane saga for a long time. Do feel like, even though the matches weren't great, that whole Undertaker-Kane story is probably one of the most interesting sagas in WWE history. So yeah, then we go, do you think Undertaker played second fiddle to Bret and Austin in 1997? Yeah, I would say that's a fair assessment. He did. I mean, go look at his pay-per-view record, and first title defense he went on before Bret and Austin at Revenge of the Taker. What was it? Obviously Canadian Stampede as well. Him and Vader went on before the 10-man main event. But to be fair, Bret and Austin was the hottest feud of the WWF at the time. Bret had been the top star in the WWF since 1992. Austin was the greatest up-and-coming star since Hulkamania, so you have to play second fiddle to it. This isn't something bad to play second fiddle to, but that's not a knock on the Undertaker, it's just how good the Bret and Austin feud was, really. So yeah. Then we got Owen Peterson. His questions, Owen Peterson 4. His questions are: suppose Brian Pillman never injured his ankle in the car that eventually led to his death before Bad Blood. So yeah, that's not really a proper question, but yeah, obviously I feel like a healthy Brian Pillman coming to the WWF would have been a big asset for them. I mean, he was a good worker, he's a great talker. I think he's a loose cannon gimmick as well. Just rife with the new attitude switch in the WWE. I mean, he could have had an awesome feud with Austin. I feel like healthy Pillman versus Austin would have been fucking tremendous rivalry. Probably would have at some point in 1997 been an Intercontinental Champion. I would say that would have been a fair goal for him. Maybe Pillman and Shawn Michaels, that could have been interesting. Maybe he could have had some of Rocky Maivaga's first matches. So obviously I don't think Brian Pillman would have been like the WWF champion or anything like that, but he could have been one of those guys that got the odd pay-per-view main event out of him. I think especially if he was facing with Austin, I feel like they could have went on the back history of the Hollywood Blondes in WCW and all that. But yeah, so that would have been interesting. It's really sad what happened to Brian Pillman, to be honest with you. Really is. Just feel like one of the better talents in the business of all time. He had a great career initially as a great worker in the late 80s, early 90s, and then from 1996 to the end of his life became a great character. So yeah, it's just sad really for that one. Then we got do you suppose the switch from red, white and blue ring ropes and blue posts and turnbuckles to all red ropes and black posts reflect the transition of the new generation to the Attitude Era? Yeah, I feel like in general, if you remember, I think it was March of 1997, the whole show got revamped to Raw's War. So yeah, I think the problem was in like 1996, early 1997, visually the show still resembled a 1986, 1987 taping, and that was one of the big problems. Where you look over the other side at Nitro, and they have this fantastic set. Just everything about the show looks cutting edge and modern. So just feel like WWF making that change, getting rid of the old red, white and ring ropes, all red and black. Obviously the stage design and all that, which isn't really in this question, but just feel like that, yeah, that helped change the perception that the WWF was changing. Really did. Do you suppose WWF was still more popular than WCW in Canada and the UK in 1997? What of the Heart Foundation, Canadian Stampede, etc.? Well, I can speak from a UK point of view. Not sure about Canada because obviously I'm not from Canada, but I would have to guess the WWF was probably more popular. Obviously with Bret Hart, it was pretty much a god in Canada at the time, still is. Yeah, and obviously the Canadian Stampede pay-per-view, and they would tape Raw in Canada quite a few times, where I don't even think WCW really did Canada back then, did they? I mean, off the top of my head, I can't really recall WCW going to Canada at the time. And I think one of the reasons he signed Bret, obviously, one was the intent of getting away from the WWF. The other one, Bischoff says he needed more talent for Thunder. But I think another potential idea for bringing Bret in was to try and improve the presence in Canada, because WCW has Bret Hart. Sure, the theory was a lot of you Canadian fans would jump over. Now I'll speak for the UK. Now all I'll say definitely, hot as WCW was in the United States back then, WWF was always more popular in England, UK, because they had the big presence on Sky Sports. They had the history here with SummerSlam 1992, various successful tours and all that, and also they had the British Bulldog at the time, which was a huge star over here. Bret Hart was hugely popular here as well, that's the thing. Bret Hart may not have been a great draw in the United States, but he was a great draw in Europe and Canada. So yeah, obviously even then, like, I didn't watch WCW that much at the time. Like, I saw enough to know what was what and all that, and reading about it in magazines, but the bulk of my wrestling fan watching back then was definitely watching the WWF, because I was a WWF fan, loyal WWF fan back then. Then what have we got now? Do you think we should forgive Owen Hart for injuring Austin? Is anyone really mad at Owen Hart for doing that? I mean, yeah, obviously you might get some people who are pissed off, but aren't the majority of people alright with it? I mean, don't the majority of people realise it was an accident that just happened and it wasn't really Owen's fault? I will say though, I feel like Austin probably should have forgiven Owen Hart. I mean, well known that Austin never forgave Owen Hart after that, and then obviously Owen Hart died in 1999, so I imagine something like that would weigh on Austin's mind if he never made up. Would for me anyway. If I had beef with someone and then they died and I never made up, that would bother me anyway. Then we got this is a good one. The one I've got an answer for. Like, I actually know the answer for this one. Since WCW was doing well in 1997, how come they never made attempts to hold events at Madison Square Garden, considering a number of their big stars had made names for themselves there? There's a good answer to that, and it's real simple. Vince had an exclusive deal with Madison Square Garden, as he did it for a lot of arenas actually, so I'm sure WCW would have loved to have done the Garden, but the thing was, Vince had an exclusive deal with them, because obviously the history of Madison Square Garden, the WF, goes all the way back to Vince's dad when the promotion formed. I think it even goes back to Vince's granddad, like, fuck, how many years ago? Back in like the 30s and that. I mean, I'm sure Vince's dad promoted boxing and wrestling. Vince's granddad promoted boxing and wrestling in the old MSG fucking way back. And then obviously Vince's dad, Vince Senior, that was, the Garden was his bread and butter. And then obviously Vince carried on from that. So yeah, WF and Madison Square Garden had exclusive deals. I mean, especially in the Northeast, Vince had exclusive deals with a lot of the buildings. So if you're ever wondering why WCW didn't run in a certain building in a certain area, chances are the reason was that Vince had an exclusive deal with them. It's that simple. Then we got, what have we got now? The man that was a Daniel. What do you think would have happened if Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels went on for the titles planned at WrestleMania 13? I feel it would have been an awesome match. I mean, it's ironic though that this match not happening led to Bret and Austin happening on the card, and then the whole Austin breaking out thing. I think that's got to be the best plan B ever in wrestling, hasn't it? Really, but obviously this match would have been awesome. I mean, obviously I don't think it would have been an Iron Man match again, but they probably would have had a excellent 20, 25 minute, maybe 30 minute wrestling match. I think the idea was for Bret Hart to go over, get his win back, and become the champion again. So would have been interesting, wouldn't it, really? Then how different do you think the WWE would have been if Austin never had that neck injury? Not that different, really, to be honest with you, because, yeah, Austin had the neck injury, but he was never off TV. He was still on TV every week causing mayhem. And as a matter of fact, not saying it's good that he got injured, but when he was out of the ring now, it seemed like they kept coming up with these creative scenarios to keep him on TV, but I'm not actually wrestling. And I'll say during that time he was injured, obviously this was the time he was stunnering Slaughter, stunnering Jim Ross, then that one way stunned Vince McMahon for the first time. I feel that's the time where he actually got more over than before. So as far as like how the WF would have gone, not really any different, because obviously he wasn't actually off TV, he just didn't wrestle for 3 months. Then what if Bret Hart actually walked into to do with the WF title? It wouldn't have happened. I've tried to explain this before, but it wouldn't have happened because, number one, Bret was under contract at the end of November. Number two, WF was still suing WCW over the Alundra Blaze thing, throwing the women's title in the trash can. So I think WCW actually had the WF title on TV, Vince would have had Turner by the balls and sued the shit out of them. So it was just never ever going to happen. The next set of questions, Greedy Selfish 9797. What do you think what was the best Big Four to ever for the pay-per-view of the year? Easy answer, SummerSlam by a mile. I mean, let's be honest, Royal Rumble 1997 was good. No, actually, I liked Royal Rumble 1997. I thought it was a good pay-per-view. As we established earlier, WrestleMania 13 was mediocre except for Bret and Austin. Survivor Series 1997, nothing else really matters about that. That was nothing will ever be remembered about that show apart from Montreal, where SummerSlam 1997 was a genuinely great pay-per-view. I mean, you had a Mankind, Hunter Hearst, Helmsley, great cage match. Bulldog and Shamrock had a pretty good match. LOD and the Godwins had a decent match, and then obviously Owen and Austin before the neck injury was shaped up to be a really good match. It was, and obviously, I think the great main event between Bret Hart and The Undertaker with Shawn Michaels as the referee. The big up. Do you think Vader should have had a run as the WF champion? If so, who would you like to see for the title? The only time I could really say he should have had the title, you look at the champions that year. There was Sid, there was Taker, there was Bret, and then there was Shawn. Now you can't really argue with Bret, Taker, and Shawn, can you? Really? So the only way I could see it is if the actual original plans were followed up, and Vader had defeated Shawn at Survivor Series 1996, and had the two early 1997 title runs Sid had. So obviously when Sid dropped the title to Shawn and then won it back, and then dropped it to Taker at WrestleMania. So the only reason I really see Vader having that title run in 1997, if that's how they did it, if Vader basically replaced Sid and had those short title runs, because let's face it, Undertaker deserved a long title run, Bret deserved the title run, and then Shawn was probably the rightful champion at the time, so yeah. And obviously if you feud with, I'll just say the same guy Sid feuded with, Shawn, Bret and Undertaker. Then we've got now. Do you think the botched booking of Hollywood Hogan versus Sting was the beginning of WCW's downfall? Yes, yeah I do. I mean, obviously WCW 1998 still had a lot going for it, and by any reasonable standards it was a very good product. But I'll say the first big mistake WCW made was this. I mean, you built this entire thing for a whole year. Everything suggested Sting vanquishes Hogan, WCW wins the war, and then they start to phase out of the NWO thing. But obviously, I'm sure this is your ass, I'm sure you've seen what happened in the Hogan and Sting match. No need to go into great detail, but obviously politics fucked that up. I mean, they did the stupid fast count thing that wasn't a fast count, and then they restarted the match, which Bret looked like a tit for restarting the match for no reason. Then Sting went out to beat Hogan, and then, ugh, God. To this day, that bothers me, to be honest with you. And it was the most obvious match of the year as well. I mean, obviously, this is how we build it. The babyface Sting destroys the heel, and then that's it, really, but yeah, and then I think obviously this coincided with the Dourif making a big comeback as well, so WCW's slip in early 1998. I mean, like I say, WCW 1998 was still very good and was still had a lot going for it, but at the same time, Dourif was improving leaps and bounds, and then by the spring had caught up to its rival, and then I would say the real beginning of the downfall was, I still think it was the finger poke of doom bullshit in January 1999, but that's 1999, so that's a topic for another time. And sure, if I ever do a 1999 Q&A, we'll get to that. And what have we got? This is a good one, quite a challenging one. Top best rate in your house pay-per-views. This sounds simple, right? But he writes in brackets, but Canadian Stampede cannot be included, as it was the best by default of the year. So yeah, this is a bit of a challenge now. I mean, so yeah, obviously Canadian Stampede would fucking trump it, wouldn't it, really? But he's actually made me think now. So ironically enough, I feel like most of the In Your Houses weren't actually that good. So I'll say number 3, We Cold Day in Hell in May 1997. This wasn't a particularly great show, but you had Mankind, Rocky Maivia, Vader versus Ken Shamrock, which was a pretty nice match. Then Austin versus The Undertaker was the main event. I'll say number 2 would be Revenge of the Taker in April of 1997. I feel like a pretty. I mean, this is a typical pay-per-view back then. Fairly mediocre undercard, and then a really good semi main event and main event. So the undercard was kind of yeah, but the last 2 matches really good. I mean, you had Undertaker and Mankind for the WWF title, and then Stone Cold and Bret Hart in a great match for the. Well, it wasn't the title line, but it was a great match. Then obviously number 1, I would say, In Your House Final 4, February 1997. That was actually a really good In Your House. I mean, it was a short card, but yeah, Mark Mero, Leif Cassidy was a really good opener. First ever Rock and Triple H pay-per-view match is Rocky Maivia defending the Continental title against Hunter Hearst Helmsley. A really good match between Owen Hart and the British Bulldog versus Doug Furnas and Phil LaFon. And of course, a great 4-way main event of Bret Hart versus Austin versus Vader versus The Undertaker. So yeah, that was a really good question. Then we got Mr. Beale 890. Forced on The Undertaker to do a title run. I liked that title run, I really did. Feels pretty underrated. I think it was definitely a reward type title run, because for years Undertaker put up so much crap, wrestling the likes of Kamala, Giant Gonzalez, King Mabel, King Kong Bundy. Then he had a great comeback in 1996, and then got this title run here. I mean, this is a time where a load of bullshit was going on, like Shawn Michaels was losing his smile and going home. Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels feud was getting too real. There was a lot of unprofessional behaviour going on at the time. I feel like Undertaker's one of those guys who just did his job as a company guy. He had a nice title run. I always thought it was nice that he won at WrestleMania. Had a really good match with Mankind in your house. Had a pretty decent match with Austin Cold in Hell. Alright, the Farouk match was kind of not that good. And obviously, this is the time where the whole storyline of Paul Bearer, Kane and the parents in the funeral home was going on, so that was pretty good. Had a really good match with Vader at Canadian Stampede, then obviously lost the title to Bret at SummerSlam, so yeah, I would say, because I've always thought Undertaker was never really a great champion in his career, but he was more of the guy who challenges for the title. He was always better as a special attraction and then really challenging for the title. I mean, he'd had some good title reigns like this one, the Undisputed title reign in 2002. His last world title run in 2009, 2010, but yeah, I always thought Undertaker was one of those guys who was never a great world champion. Always a better challenger for me. Then we got forcing the Triple H Mankind rivalry. Yeah, I really like this rivalry. Thought it was a fantastic rivalry. So before Triple H and Cactus Jack had the epic rivalry in 2000, Hunter Hearst Helmsley and Mankind had a great rivalry in 1997. So it really started when these two became the final of the King of the Ring that year. Helmsley defeated Mankind to win the King of the Ring. Then the feud carried on with matches at the Canadian Stampede pay-per-view. It was blown off in a great cage match at SummerSlam. Felt this rivalry helped make Triple H better. I think the thing of Hunter Hearst Helmsley, it was a cute character and all that, got some heat, but I feel like when he wrestled Mankind, he showed a tougher side of him. That this guy not only could be like, not only had like class and all that, but he could also be tough as well. And I feel like some of the beatings Mankind took were great to help gain sympathy as a babyface. So I think it was a great feud to establish Mankind's babyface run early on. I think it made Triple H into a better heel and a better performer as well. For me, anyway, this is probably one of the top 3 to 5 mid-card feuds in WWF history, in my opinion. Thought it was fantastic. Then we got thoughts of Austin and Michaels as a tag team. Yeah, it was alright. I mean, they didn't really last long. I mean, they were only really together for a little while. They had the epic match with Owen and Bulldog on Raw. I think they had one other tag team title defense against Legion of Doom, if I remember rightly. Then obviously Shawn stormed out after the big fight with Bret and Hartford in June of 1997. Then once he returned, he pretty much moved on. So it was alright, but it was the start of the angle. WWF has repeated loads and loads of times since then. It's the tag team champions who can't get along. I mean, we've seen this scenario multiple times over the years now, haven't we? I mean, a lot of times. This was really the first one though, so I thought it was alright, but I don't think anyone really, when you think of Austin and Michaels' careers, you don't really remember them being a tag team that much, do you? Apart from that Owen and Bulldog match where they won the tag team titles, that was a great television match. And then, oh god. Alright, I'm going to try and contain myself while answering this. Do you believe the rumours that Sid shit himself against The Undertaker at WrestleMania 13? Right, try not to laugh. So yeah, if anyone doesn't know, oh god, the rumour is that when WrestleMania 13 happened, Sid and The Undertaker was in the main event, and the rumour is that Sid shit his pants in the middle of that match and then had to get a tombstone from The Undertaker, which would have been quite a smelly situation for The Undertaker, wouldn't it? So that's all the rumours out there. And if I had to guess, I would say that rumour's bullshit. No pun intended, that rumour's bullshit. I think it's just one of those myths that emerged on the internet many years ago and then just kind of grew and most people just assumed it was true. So if I had to guess, I would probably say it's an urban myth that Sid shit his pants. Best in your house pay-per-view in 1997. Pretty obvious answer, really. Easiest answer of the whole video. Canadian Stampede. I mean, pretty obvious, right? And then we got 3 questions from Mr. Lucid LJ. A wrestler from the WF who should have been pushed better, who wasn't the main eventer. The only one I could really think of is Vader, who should have been... Obviously this goes back in 1996 and how he should have been booked better then. If you look at the main event scene in 1997, WF, you had Sid, you had Taker, you had Bret Hart, you had Shawn Michaels, you had The Undertaker. You can't really argue with those guys, can you, really? I mean, then obviously they tried to push Shamrock as an upper mid-carder later on. Then they had guys like the British Bulldog, Owen Hart in the upper mid-card. Up-and-comers like Rock and Triple H. So, only one I can really think of is Vader, who, like I said earlier in the video, could have had Sid's title reigns instead of Sid. Obviously, if he'd beaten Shawn back in 1996, goes into 1997 as a champion, then obviously wins it back, and then instead of Sid Vader at WrestleMania, you have Vader versus The Undertaker. So, yeah, I just feel like Vader's the only one, really. I feel, for the most part, WWF booked most of the guys really well in 1997. Can't really think of anyone who could have been booked better than they were. Obviously, you might have the odd one, like maybe LOD should have been the faces of the tag team division instead of having a short run in late 1997. But yeah, actually, yeah, I'll go with the LOD. LOD probably should have put the titles right back on them and made them the faces of the tag team division. So yeah, then what have we got? 3 talents from WCW should have been elevated to the main event scene. This is a weird one for me, really, because for years I always subscribed to the theory that the likes of Benoit, Jericho, Guerrero were all treated like shit in WCW. But as I've gotten older and I've just thought about more over the years, I always think, were they really treated that bad? Not really, in my opinion. I mean, Benoit was a big part of the Four Horsemen, got the US title level, even won the world title later on. Guerrero was in the Cruiserweight division, was United States champion, but Guerrero had his problems with drug and alcohol. Jericho did well for himself, got that great character. Yeah, I suppose Jericho has a little bit of a gripe because the Goldberg thing didn't go down like he wanted. But as far as 1997, it's hard. I think it's more of 1998 that WCW need to start elevating guys, because look at 1997. They were still kicking ass, they were still winning the ratings war, and look at who they had. They had Hogan, Sting, Savage, Luger, Giant, Nash, Hall, Piper. Can you really find 3 guys that could have broke that mold? I mean, one guy that kind of broke through that year was DDP. I suppose you could have turned the Steiners, had the Steiners turn against each other a year earlier and maybe elevated Scott in 1997. But he's the only one I could really think of, to be honest with you. And then what have we got? That's a good one. Dream match in ECW that never happened in 1997. I'll give you 2. One, we got Raven versus Sabu. That never happened in ECW at all, which was kind of interesting because at the time they were 2 of the biggest stars in ECW. Probably because they were both heels. No, I tell a lie, actually. Sabu was a babyface, wasn't he? Because him and Taz did the double turn at the end. So yeah, I think Raven Sabu, that would have been an interesting match to see. No one, this is probably just for me, but when Terry Funk was the ECW champion, I feel like for some reason Terry Funk versus Rob Van Dam would have been very interesting. Would have been interesting to see how they would adapt to each other. Obviously Terry Funk by then was in his early 50s, he wasn't going to be flying around much anymore. RVD was all high spots and big moves and all that, so that would have been interesting to see how they would have adapted to each other. I mean, you saw Terry Funk work with most of the young guys back then. Best of my knowledge, never worked RVD. That would have been really interesting. Then we got next set of questions from Harry Ricker. Most underrated matches of 1997. I'll give you a few off the top of my head. Probably the main event of Slamboree 1997. Nash Hall and 6 versus Ric Flair, Roddy Piper and Kevin Green. That was really good. Bret Hart and Stone Cold at Revenge of the Taker. Obviously, for obvious reasons, the Survivor Series and the WrestleMania matches get more love, which of course they do because they were amazing. But this match was, I always consider this the forgotten Bret Hart and Austin pay-per-view match. This was a really good match, although the finish kind of wasn't that great, but Although the finish kind of sucked. Yeah, the match was really good though. Shawn Michaels and Austin from King of the Ring. Thought that was a phenomenal match with a bad ending. Really didn't not like that ending at all. What else have we got? Trying to think. Let's have a think here. Jericho Ultimo Dragon from Bash at the Beach was a really good match. I thought that was a great pay-per-view match actually. Ultimo Dragon Steven Regal from Slamboree, that was a tremendous match. I mean, there's another question here about underrated gems and hidden classics from 1997, so I'll talk about it a bit more in depth later on. Then what have we got? Well, let's scroll back up a second. Most underrated feuds, I would say probably Legion of Doom versus the Godwins. That was a really underrated rivalry. The whole Legion of Doom breaking the Godwins' neck. It just felt like two rugged bastard teams just knocking the shit out of each other, especially when the Godwins turned heel. I feel like they were just really good, rugged redneck type characters going against the Legion of Doom. What have we got? Obviously, Mankind and Hunter Hearst Helmsley. That was a really good rivalry back then. What have we got? Let's have a think. Let's have a think here. It was Chris Candido Lance Storm was 1988, wasn't it? Trying to think here. Bloody hell, you got me on the spot here now. Bulldog Shamrock in 1997. Thought that was a pretty good rivalry overall, to be honest. Triple H Goldust. That was a pretty decent rivalry. Triple H versus Goldust. Obviously the matches weren't that great, but promos were awesome. Goldust and Brian Pillman in late 1997. That was one of the first times like they started doing work shoe stuff about Pillman and Marlena. Because if you don't know, before Goldust and Marlena / Terry Runnels got together, Pillman was with Brian Pillman and Terry were a couple many years ago. Trying to think of some WCW ones that I can think of that were underrated. Nash and Hall versus the Steiners. That was a pretty underrated feud. Liked that quite a bit. That was a pretty good one. Not many I can just think of the top of my head, like. Chris Benoit and Meng had an interesting feud back then. I mean, they had a pair of pretty good pay-per-view matches, Slamboree and Great American Bash, so yeah. Ric Flair and Kurt Hennig later on the year, after Hennig had turned on the Horsemen, went for the NWO. That was pretty interesting to see Ric Flair and Kurt Hennig. Although the matches were just decent, but still. There we go. Who could have been a good WF champion if given the chance? Kind of answered this before, but the only one I could really think of was Vader. If Vader had had Sid's title reigns instead of Sid, because you got to think of it. Like I say, you had Undertaker, Bret and Shawn Michaels, the other three champions. Austin was being saved for 1998. Guys like Mankind weren't WF title material then. Owen and Bulldog had been mid-carders for so long that don't think that was ever going to work. So yeah, pretty much Vader really. Then we're getting down to how many people we got left. I've only got a few people left now. We've got Diesel 101 Raw. Could Austin have been a top 5 then Intercontinental Champion? Had the neck injury happened? Not really, because I feel like obviously he wasn't destined to be a long-term champion, really, was he? I mean, yeah, he would have had some good matches in that title run, but obviously that was really just a stepping stone for Austin to go towards the WWF title in 1998. I mean, I feel like, say the neck injury didn't happen, yeah, he would have had October, September, November, and then I feel like he would have lost the title. Well, not lost the title, but given up the title in the exact same way in December. So I don't really think Austin was destined to be great in the Continental Champion, to be honest with you. Best feud in 1997, Bret Hart versus Stone Cold Steve Austin for me. Wow, loved this feud as a kid. Love it now. I just feel like obviously the matches, the intensity, the promos, just fucking fantastic. One of the best feuds in wrestling history, Bret Hart and Stone Cold really was. Who would Sid a feud with after Vader had he stayed in the WWF? So yeah, there's always been this match graphic there that I saw a few years ago with Sid facing Vader at SummerSlam, but for the life of me, I just can't remember that at all. I mean, I cannot, because obviously most, like, when I look back at most matches that were supposed to happen, like Austin and Pillman as King of the Ring, Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels as King of the Ring, like where they had match graphics for and the match got changed. I can remember stuff like this as a kid, but for Sid and Vader, I just cannot remember for the life of me. So let's assume that happened and he moved on. I would say could have easily slotted Sid in there to feud with Bret into the Patriot at Ground Zero. I mean, Bret and Sid had unfinished business. I mean, Bret and Sid had their big title matches at Raw in early 1997. So now Sid is a pure face, Bret is a pure Canadian heel. That could have been good. So you could have done Bret and Sid for Ground Zero. Like, then after that, I suppose, trying to think really for something for Survivor Series, probably just would have been on Team USA, the Survivor Series, and then obviously the end of 1997, going to 1998. I'm not real sure after that. Maybe instead of Vader, he could have had some of Kane's first matches, really put Kane over the younger monster beats the older monster type of thing. That would have been interesting. So yeah, what have we got? Should the Hart Foundation, Nation of Domination had one match of each other Bad Blood? Bret and Owner in a tag team match, Owner and Farouk face each other, and Rock and D-Lo Kama face LOD. Sounded perfect. I mean, yeah, I guess. I mean, if they did, I wouldn't have been that bothered, but it would have been alright, I suppose. So obviously, what would have been sad though is Pillman would have been advertised for this match, and they would have had to change the match because Brian Pillman died that day, if you remember. So I'm not sure whether obviously, so it'd obviously be Bret, Owen, Bulldog, and Neidhart. Then you could have had Farouk, Kama, D-Lo, and The Rock. So yeah, I suppose would have been nice to see Bret and The Rock hook up in some capacity on a pay-per-view. I suppose definitely would have been better than that flag match with Bret and Davey against Patriot and Vader. So yeah, why not? Members of the NWO didn't belong, right? So if you remember, once the NWO started expanding, seemed like all WCW did for a while is put the NWO shirt on a guy and assume he'd get over, which sometimes it did, but sometimes it didn't. So guys that wouldn't have the NWO, I think Vincent wasn't really a good member at all. Vincent / Virgil. Horace might have been 1998, but Horace was in there, he shouldn't have been. Big Bubba Rogers / Big Boss Man, didn't really like him being the NWO at all. Didn't feel like that was a great fit. Who else? Conan, wasn't really big on him being the NWO. So for me, the NWO shouldn't have expanded much beyond the original three. DiBiase 6. Who else? Savage, I feel, was a worthy member. Then I think the limit for me is Bagwell and Norton. I mean, I would have had those guys in because I feel like Norton was a badass looking dude, and then Bagwell was a young guy of potential at the time. So other guys to not be in, Michael Wall Street, aka IRS. So yeah, that was a particularly great fit. And not that he wasn't a great wrestler or anything, but didn't like Kurt Hennig being the NWO. Thought shit all over the Horsemen, really. I just feel like Hennig would have been better served as a babyface fighting against the NWO. Because obviously Hennig was seen as more of a traditional wrestler type thing. Much like a Flair, much like an Arn Anderson. So I feel like you should have just kept Hennig in the Four Horsemen and then had Hennig fighting guys in the NWO instead of being the NWO. Then we got, and for once in your life, for this, you're not last. And that's Prince of Strong Style 9v2. In order from January to December, pick the best pay-per-view of the month between the WCW and the WWF. You can look at it from either quality or successful financial standpoint. No ECW since you only had about 2 pay-per-views. So, okay, I get this. So January, I would give the nod to the Royal Rumble over Sold Out. February, again, I would go with the WWF. Their Final Four beat Super Brawl. March, and this is quite sad considering it was WWF's biggest pay-per-view. The Uncensored beat WrestleMania, unfortunately. April, I would say Spring Stampede beat Revenge of the Taker. May, I would say, again, another round WCW. Slamboree was a better pay-per-view than Cold Day in Hell. June, again, unfortunately, WCW wins this one. Great American Bash is better than King of the... Now, July, I would say Canadian Stampede obviously beat Bash at the Beach. Although I will say, those were two awesome pay-per-views and probably the best month for WF versus WCW pay-per-views of the year. Then August, SummerSlam beats Road Wild. September, I'll probably say Fall Brawl slightly beats Ground Zero. October, this is a tough one because neither were particularly great. Say Bad Blood probably just about trumps Halloween Havoc. 1997, I would say World War III for WCW beats Survivor Series of the WWF. And the last one, two shitty pay-per-views actually, but I would say Starrcade was less shitty than In Your House DX. So therefore Starrcade beats DX. Then we got considering Bear League is reaching its 20th anniversary on April 13th. Well, you sent this question before April 13th. It's now the 19th, so that anniversary is already come and gone. How could failure damage the company massively? I mean, it was a big financial loss. Obviously, ECW didn't have a big budget like WCW did, and WWF did to an extent, although they weren't as rich as they had been in the past. I mean, so let's compare to WCW. WCW had a massive budget in 1997 with Ted Turner's billions and all that. Paul Heyman certainly didn't have millions of dollars. So if you put the money into this and it's flopped and failed, but I don't know if it would have crippled the company outright and might have been able to cling on for a little bit longer, but would have been massive financial losses, would have probably made sure ECW died long before it did. I feel obviously pay-per-view was the next step as well at the time. I mean, ECW had come a long way from a little town in Philadelphia, made up a hardcore cult following, had the syndicated TV shows, made some noise, started being able to get going to 1,000-seat buildings and sell it out and all that. But obviously it was a niche product, obviously. I mean, much like stuff like Ring of Honor, Evolve, Lucha Underground are today. But they got on pay-per-view and that was a big deal at the time. That was just natural progression. So getting on pay-per-view, being a success, and then getting to a second pay-per-view was a big deal for them at the time. I feel like if you'd had that one pay-per-view failed and then dropped off the face of the earth, people wouldn't remember ECW, but because Bear League was good and it was considered a financial success, on a modest level of course. I mean, they didn't draw anything like the WWF or WCW would, but for ECW what they drew for Barely Legal was pretty impressive. So yeah, that would have been interesting. It's obvious WWF wanted to compete with WCW's Cruiserweight division by having their own light heavyweight division. Great Sasuke was supposed to be the head of the division, had strong talent and competition. How successful would the division have been in terms of quality and excitement on the undercard TV and pay-per-views? And who would have been a great choice to add to the division? It would have been good, but like I said earlier in the video, problem was, for Cruiserweight talent, WCW had Dean Malenko, Rey Mysterio, Chris Jericho, Eddie Guerrero, Psychosis, Ultimo Dragon, Juventud Guerrera. That was the best light heavyweight cruiserweight talent in the world at the time. So yeah, WWF could have had some good guys. I mean, they did. They had Taka Michinoku, Brian Christopher, and going back to what you said originally, and I'm not sure what happened here, but you're right. Great Sasuke was supposed to be the face of the division. If you remember, he had a couple of big wins, and particularly Canadian Stampede over Taka. And then I don't know why. I'm not sure exactly what happened, but Sasuke left the WWF for some. They got rid of Sasuke and maybe had a disagreement or something like that. And then Taka Michinoku became the face of the division. I mean, Taka Michinoku was great and all. I did like Taka Michinoku, but thing is though, he wasn't a Guerrero, he wasn't a Dean Malenko, he wasn't a Rey Mysterio. And obviously you had Brian Christopher, who was solid, and then people like Oculus or kind of touched this early in the video. So guys, I would have added to the division. I think Jerry Lynn was around at the time, so I think he would have been perfect addition to it. Another one I said was Tajiri, who I think Tajiri even competed on Raw in the tournament, I think, if I remember right. The worst one I remember, they had fucking... Do you remember when they had Scott Putski come out in the light heavyweight division? And I don't know if you've ever seen Scott Putski. He's Ivan Putski's son, but he's like 6 foot tall and jacked up as shit. And you can look and think, hang on, this isn't a light heavyweight. Stop pulling our legs here. I mean, Kid Cash was an independent wrestler at the time. He probably could have done a good job. Who else? But I'm not sure. Obviously, they could have brought all the members of Kai Time, like Funaki, Dick Togo, Men's Teo. Well, I just went there, didn't it? They had Scott Taylor in later on, so yeah. Who else? Can't remember. Super Crazy was around at the time, working independent, so why not bring him in? That would have been interesting. Actually, no, I've just remembered who was an independent wrestler at the time and was a light heavyweight at the time. Christopher Daniels. I mean, Christopher Daniels would have been like 24 years old in 1997, so he could have maybe done a job. So, and as far as excitement, the only thing, if you took it seriously and actually gave them meaningful matches, and yeah, they could have had some nice undercard gems throughout 1997 going into 1998, but more than likely Vince would have just done what he did, give them 5-minute matches, 2-3-minute sprints on Raw and all that. So, I mean, if they took it seriously and actually pushed the talent, it could have been pretty good, but let's be honest, it had no chance to compete with WCW's Cruiserweight division. I mean, the talent WCW had was just insane at the time. Oh God. Favourite memories of the time, any interesting stories we've never heard that you'd be open to tell about your experience at the time, like watching pay-per-views like One Night Only, etc. Favourite memories, so you got to remember, I mainly only watched the WWF at the time, so I'll say favourite memories as a whole Bret Hart and Austin feud, and just watching that WrestleMania match, and then the whole heel turn for Bret Hart, which was great. It was great for me how he did it, because as a 10-year-old, I was a good lad as a 10-year-old. I cheered the faces, I hated the heels. I just played along for the show and went along with it. So, one of the big things about Bret Hart's heel turn is he only turned heel in America. He was a babyface everywhere else, in Canada, UK, Germany. Over there he was a babyface, so I was just really happy about that, that Bret was a babyface over here, so I could continue being a big Bret Hart supporter. Then obviously after that, I loved the fucking angle he did on Raw where Bret, Owen and Davey reunited. I thought, fuck me, that was brilliant. Just such an emotional segment. And I always remembered Owen Hart crying his eyes out. I thought that was brilliant. You know, like, I love you, Owen. I love you, Bret. And they all hugged it out, and it was nice. So the whole Hart Foundation thing, I thought was awesome. And then Jim Neidhart came in, so I thought, oh, this is really cool. I remember Jim Neidhart, watching him on tape back in the day with him and Bret. So this is pretty cool. We got all the Harts together. And obviously the whole Austin thing. Remember really loving the whole Undertaker-Kane saga with Paul Bearer blackmailing the Undertaker. That was a really dark plot. I loved that plot. It really was brilliant. I really remember getting excited. You know when Mankind did those interviews with Jim Ross? I mean, Mankind was one of the first heroes I really liked, because I really enjoyed his work in 1996. And then listening to those promos and realising, you know what, growing up he was just a normal kid as a wrestler fan like me. So those promos helped me identify more with Mick Foley, Mankind the Man. So that really got me more invested in Mankind than ever before. Really became a much bigger Mick Foley fan after, because like I say, when he told these stories about how he was a kid and wanted to be a wrestler and all that, I'm like, I'm a kid now, I love wrestling, this guy is cool. So yeah, I really enjoyed Mankind. And then obviously I'm getting older now, so I'm learning more about life and stuff, and then so obviously I'm more open to Attitude Era stuff, because I'm getting older now. I've been exposed to stuff like that now. I kind of know stuff like that, so I'm seeing all the DX things start up and I'm thinking, wow, this is fucking awesome. I mean, obviously some of the DX stuff, and I look back now and think, it's not that funny really. I mean, the punchline is basically penis, isn't it really? But I remember I was blown away by some of the stuff that Shawn and Triple H were doing back then. Because that sort of stuff was becoming more prevalent on TV. I mean, I think South Park started up around the same time, and that was way more vulgar than the WWF could have been, couldn't it, really? So, I remember loving all that. I remember being blown away by the Shawn and Taker Hell in a Cell match. Bad Blood, I thought, fucking hell. I've never seen anything like this before, and then absolutely loving Kane's debut. I thought that was a fucking amazing moment. Kane's WWF debut. Obviously, once I saw Kane coming in Tombstone the Undertaker, that's it. I was fucking invested in this match. Then obviously the sad things like Bret Hart leaving the way he did. I mean, that was really sad for me to see my favourite go away and never really come back until he was like in his 50s and no longer a wrestler. So whole Montreal thing, which I didn't totally understand at the time because I was 10 and I didn't completely get the inner workings of the business. I mean, I knew wrestling wasn't real, but I still didn't, because obviously it's not like now where kids can access all this shit online and obviously talk to people. And I mean, obviously the average 10-year-old wrestling fan now is way smarter to wrestling than I was as a 10-year-old. So although I didn't truly understand Montreal at the time, just the sadness of Bret going and how much I ended up hating Vince over that. And obviously later in 1998 he turned that into the Mr. McMahon character. The sadness of seeing, well, I didn't actually watch One Night Only at the time because it was a box office pay-per-view. It was the first ever pay-per-view that we had to pay for in the UK, because don't know how many people know this, but back then we got all the pay-per-views for free on Sky Sports, whereas you had this One Night Only which was on Sky Box Office, which I had to pay for. And obviously my parents didn't buy the pay-per-view for me. I didn't have money when I was 10, so I didn't find out the result till because remember, I didn't have the internet then, so obviously if this was now and I hadn't seen it, I'd be all over Twitter, live results would be coming through. So I didn't actually find out that the Bulldog lost till probably the following weekend when I was watching WWF on TV. So the sadness of seeing the Bulldog lose to Shawn Michaels for the European title, and obviously now I've grown up, I've seen all this, and I was so pissed off about it. So yeah, I don't really have any funny stories that I can remember, really. Not like the Undertaker one I told you back in the last video, one of the last videos. I can't really remember anything, to be honest with you. I can't remember any funny stuff, to be honest. What we've got? Yeah, you might ask this question once or twice. Hidden gems of classics from WWF, WCW, ECW, etc. So yeah, this is one you ask on every single video. So I'll go through some hidden gems. And for the WWF, I always liked Triple H and Goldust from Royal Rumble. Thought that was a really good match. Really did enjoy that one. Owen and the Bulldog versus Doug Furnas and Phil LaFon from Final Four. That's definitely a match worth checking out. Really good match. Even the first Hunter and Rocky match from Thursday Raw Thursday was actually pretty good, where Rocky won the Intercontinental title. That was pretty cool. What have we got now? Austin and Mankind had a good match on Raw in April of 1997. Then obviously Bret and Austin main event of Revenge of the Taker. Shamrock and Vader from Cold Day in Hell. That was a really good match. But I'll say somewhat of a classic was Austin and Shawn Michaels from the King of the Ring. I thought that was actually an excellent match despite the kind of crappy finish. Matches, forgotten match from Canadian Stampede, Mankind, Hunter Hearst Helmsley. That was a really good opener, great brawl. One I shared with you on the Undertaker top match in the 1997 video that you asked about. Flag match from July 21st, 1997. It was in Canada, Vancouver, I think, and that was a 6-man flag match. Stone Cold, Undertaker, and Dude Love versus Bret, Owen and Davey. That was a really good match, really was. What else? What else? Oh, although I didn't really like the feud, I thought the Bret and Patriot match from Ground Zero was pretty good. Because they were like, why the fuck's the Patriot going for the WWE title? And then now we're getting fucking Jinder Mahal going for the WWE title in 2017. And all of a sudden the Patriot challenging for the WWF title doesn't look so bad now. But yeah, I think Owen and Shawn had a match before Survivor Series. Where Owen was the Intercontinental and Shawn was the European champion. Can't remember the exact date, but it was sometime in between Bad Blood and Survivor Series. That was a really good. And another one right before Montreal. I think it was 2 weeks before Montreal, I think. Bret Hart and Ken Shamrock had a WWF title match. Actually, no, I don't think it was a title match, was it? Bret Hart and Ken Shamrock had a nice little match on Raw. Now we go to WCW. So I think Chris Jericho, Eddie Guerrero from Super Brawl was a very good match. I don't think it was a great match, but it was very good. So 2 matches from Slamboree. I'll give that's 3 matches from Slamboree actually. Steven Regal, a little more Dragon, thought that was a really good match, really good opener. Chris Benoit and Jeff Jarrett. Yes, Art, don't get upset, but I'm praising Jeff Jarrett. Jarrett and Benoit had a really good match. And the one, I would say my favourite, most underrated WCW gem, touching it earlier in the video, I think I've talked about this with you before, that 6-man main event of Kevin Nash, Scott Hall and Six versus Ric Flair, Roddy Piper and Kevin Green. Because obviously back then NWO was like the whole in thing of wrestling. But in Charlotte down south, Ric Flair was still the man. This was Ric Flair's big return from a shoulder injury. So although the NWO were popular and all that back then, in Charlotte, this was Ric Flair's country. And this was Ric Flair's night. And one of the rare times WCW actually got one over on the WWE, over the NWO. So then Bash at the Beach. Now, this might sound daft, but go with me here. Just listen, hear me out. Bash at the Beach, Ric Flair and Roddy Piper. Now, I know what you're thinking. Ric Flair and Roddy Piper in 1997. Have you been drinking again? But no, I haven't. No, I'm serious. Go and watch that match. Considering it's Ric Flair and Roddy Piper in 1997, it's actually really good. I mean, just trust me on that and go and watch it. And then another match, a retirement match. Chris Benoit versus Kevin Sullivan. Now, match everybody talks about was a Great American Bash in 1996 between these two, but I honestly feel like this match was better than that match. I really do. That was a great one, it really was. What else can I think of? He's a good one. You remember the Eddie Guerrero Rey Mysterio Halloween Havoc Classic? Well, a month later at World War III in 1997, they had another match for the Cruiserweight title. That was a 4-star match, but obviously the one they had at Halloween Havoc was a 5-star match, so it kind of gets forgotten. Then we've got ECW. There's a few from ECW that I can remember, because obviously I haven't seen a ton from ECW, but say RVD Lance Storm from Barely Legal, although I will say there's some sloppiness involved, which is part of the course of RVD and ECW. RVD Tommy Dreamer flag match in November to Remember. That was pretty good. Taz and Chris Candido, the opener of Hardcore Heaven. That was a good little match to watch. Good little wrestler match. But there's not much really I can think from ECW. Here's one. Obviously another one where you might think, Lundrick, have you been drinking again? But Bill Alfonso versus Beulah McGillicuddy from a show called As Good as It Gets. Now, I know on paper this kind of sounds ridiculous. This kind of sounds stupid. You mean a 135-pound manager, Bill Alfonso, versus a non-wrestler woman and Beulah McGillicuddy? And yes, I'm being serious. I mean, it was a 5-minute match, but they did fucking all sorts with each other. Like, Bill Alfonso was bleeding like shit. They were doing all these crazy spots and all that. I mean, no, seriously. I mean, was it a great wrestler match? Of course it wasn't. But was it an entertaining spectacle? Yes, it was. Now, trust me, I know how silly this sounds, but just go and watch it. Then we got 3 more people to get through, and we're getting there. So yeah, we got Maximus 4587. Okay, right. What? In your opinion, what are the most underrated matches in WCW and WWF? I kind of just wait. Let's go back to the last question. I went through a bunch of them there, so nothing really to add there. I used to go. I think it was a bad move for WCW to have Savage join the NWO Super Brawl 7. No, I don't. I think it was a good move. A very good move, in fact. I mean, I feel like heel turn was really good for Savage at the time. He'd been a face for a couple of years now in WCW, so I feel like the character change was good for him. And obviously, what was the early premise of the NWO? And that's North WWF guys invading. Now, you had Nash and Hall, and then obviously you had Hogan, who was Mr. WWF, but you think of WWF back then, and who else was really big in the WWF back then? Randy Savage. So Savage joined the NWO. Kind of made sense because he wasn't. I like to see NWO versus traditional WCW guys. Savage wasn't that. I think a traditional WCW. I think of Flair, Sting, Luger, the Steiners. Don't really put Randy Savage in that category. So then obviously that freed up Savage to have that amazing feud of DDP in 1997, and then obviously yeah. So I feel like Savage was a great fit for the NWO, and he had Elizabeth with him in the NWO as well, which I thought was pretty good. What do we have now? Do you think NWO storyline starting to go off the rails at Sold Out? Not really. I mean, I'll say really more late 1997, early 1998, when they broke off and became NWO Hollywood and NWO Wolfpack. It's really when the NWO started to slip, but yeah, the Sold Out pay-per-view was bad. I mean, it really was. But it did look kind of cool, and I do agree with some of the sentiments some guys have said that having NWO guys lose on their own pay-per-view was a bad idea. But let's be honest, NWO was still extremely, extremely hot. I mean, see, the best period was the first 5 or 6 months, but definitely don't think it went off the rails after Sold Out. I think going off the rails actually started much later than that. What have we got? What was the worst wrestling match in 1997 in each of the big promotions? WWF, WCW, ECW. Ooh, it's a good question. I can't really think one for ECW because I haven't seen a ton of stuff from ECW that year. And was a Sandman Lance Wright ambulance match in 1997? If it was, I'll go with that. But I can't. That might have been 1998. I can't remember. It was a long time ago. WCW. What was the worst match I've seen? Probably Hogan Piper Age in the Cage, Halloween Havoc 1997. That was pretty dreadful. And then, as far as the WWF goes, let's have a think. Nothing's coming to mind straight away, so I'm gonna have to go into my brain and think a little bit here. What was the worst match? Butterbean Mark Mero in Your House DX. That one's coming to mind. That shitty boxing match that they had. Thought that was, yeah, I'll go with that because I thought that was terrible. Then the last one. What are the most underrated wrestling pay-per-views of 1997? Top 3 most underrated, I would say Slamboree was very underrated. Slamboree 1997. That was Regal and Ultimo Dragon. Chris Benoit and Jeff Jarrett. Actually, no, I don't know. Was that actually, that might have been Dean Malenko and Jeff Jarrett, actually, now I think about it. Yeah, because did Benoit wrestle Meng on that show, didn't he? Fuck. So yeah, that was good. Malenko Jarrett, and then obviously the main event, which I've talked about on this before. Royal Rumble 1997, I would say is quite underrated. That gets quite forgotten about. I mean, you had a great Royal Rumble that year, Austin going over. Not a great match, but Shawn winning the title back in San Antonio was interesting. Taker and Vader had a solid little match earlier in the card. And I also feel like Triple H and Goldust was a really good match for the Intercontinental title. And so one more, let's have a think here. Yeah, good question. Spring Stampede, kind of underrated maybe. I mean, you had a great match of Dragon and Rey Mysterio, Macho Man and DDP, so yeah, why not go for Spring Stampede? And then we got one question from one guy, Tommy Cravens, top 5 matches of 1997. So number 5, and this is how good the rest of the matches were, because this one's number 5. Owen Hart versus a British Bulldog on Raw from Germany on March the 7th of that year. Fantastic wrestling match. It was the final of the tournament for the European title. It's just one of those, yeah, definitely check this match out if you haven't seen it. My opinion, it's the best Raw match ever still. Just a fantastic wrestler match, you know. Just honestly, just give it a chance. It was a really great match. And then number 4, Hart Foundation versus Stone Cold, Goldust, Ken Shamrock, Legion of Doom, Canadian Stampede. Oh my God, what a match. Heat was absolutely incredible as well. I mean, what a crowd that was. What an exciting match that was, with a great finish. Now, these 3 matches, really, any other year, any of these 3 could have been match of the year. I mean, there's really not much in them at all, because these 3 here are 3 of the absolute best matches in wrestling history. And I hate that the other 2 can't win, but number 3, and I hate to put this match at number 3, but I have to. Eddie Guerrero, Rey Mysterio for the Cruiserweight Championship at Halloween Havoc in 1997. Wow. This is one of the best matches of all time. I really do think that. What a match this was. Absolute classic. Just pretty much a flawless match. I mean, perfect wrestler match. Great spots, great psychology, some great near falls. No botches, nothing like that. Everything looked perfect. An amazing match. And then number 1 and 2 both come from the WWF. And number 2, Undertaker vs Shawn Michaels Hell in a Cell from Bad Blood. I did a match retrospective on this a while back, so if you want to see the full force, you can go back and watch that video. But obviously, I'm sure you've all seen it, so do you really need me to tell you how great that match was? I mean, be stating the obvious, that's a classic, one of the best matches of all time. And then number 1, I think it's pretty obvious now, Bret Hart vs Stone Cold for WrestleMania 13. Not only was this the match in 1997 for me, this was also the greatest WrestleMania match of all time, and, big statement I know, but this is what I truly believe, the best match in WWE history, right here. Bret Hart, Stone Cold, WrestleMania 13, just wow. If you haven't seen that match, where the hell have you been? Go on the network, go on YouTube, go on Dailymotion, find or get a DVD, whatever you have to do, just watch that match, thank me later. The greatest match of all time. Well, not the greatest match of all time. The greatest match of all time in WWF. The greatest match ever was probably Flair and Steamboat Clash of the Champions, but that's 89's another video for another time. Then last set of questions come from Michael Shepherdson. Your top 5 pay-per-views and wrestlers in 1997. It can be WCW and the WF. So pay-per-views, I'll do pay-per-views first, and one's kind of cheating, but I'm going to count it anyway. So hang on, right? Okay, number 5, I would probably say WCW Bash at the Beach in 1997. Thought that was a great pay-per-view. You had Chris Jericho and Ultimo Dragon was a great match on there. Chris Benoit, Kevin Sullivan was a great match on that show. Like I say, Flair and Roddy Piper was a really good match on that show. What else? There was a 6-man cruiserweight match on that show, which was good, but I can't remember all the people involved. I think it was the likes of Le Parker and Psychosis and all those guys. Then obviously the main event was not a classic by any means, but I felt it was entertaining anyway, and that's Hulk Hogan and Dennis Rodman versus Lex Luger and the Giant. And then for number 4, I'll go for SummerSlam, WWF SummerSlam 1997. That was a great pay-per-view, one of the better SummerSlams of all time, I feel. 3 great matches like Hunter S. Helmsley versus Mankind, cage match. Austin versus Owen before the power drive. Botch was a great match. Bret and Undertaker was a classic. They had some decent undercard matches such as British Bulldog and Ken Shamrock. Even thought Legion of Doom versus the Godwins was pretty decent. Yeah, so a really good show. And then this is the one where you might consider it cheating a little bit because it wasn't a proper worldwide pay-per-view, but WWF One Night Only, the UK exclusive pay-per-view from Birmingham. This is the best show WWF ever put on this part of the world. Best show WWF ever put on the UK. Really do feel like that. You had Triple H versus Dude Love in a really good opener. Actually, I should have mentioned that on the Underrated Gems video, so I forgot about that one. What have we got? Surprisingly enough, the Headbangers versus Los Barricos was pretty good. Obviously, the really good match between Owen Hart and Vader. Then you had Undertaker versus Bret Hart, and what was a great match. Then obviously Shawn Michaels and the British Bulldog, which was a really memorable main event. You could say the right or wrong reasons, that's up for debate. Then number 2, obviously, well, not obviously, but ECW Barely Legal. I love that show. I'd watched that show like last week again. Really great show. I mean, you had Dudley's versus the Eliminators in a pretty hot opener. RAD Lance Storm, that was a really good match. This match would have been, on the last question where I got asked about top 5 matches, this match would be number 6, and that's the Michinoku Pro 6-man tag team match with Taka Michinoku, Dick Togo, Men's Teo versus Great Sasuke, Gran Hamada, and I've forgotten the other guy's name. Bugger! I've forgot the other guy's name in the match. The one who dressed like a Power Ranger. Oh, fuck! The name's gone, I can't remember it. Then obviously the big showdown between Sabu and Taz. First time ever, really great match. And then the feel-good moment of Terry Funk winning the freeway dance and then beating Raven to become the world champion. And then obviously number 1, I mean, come on, this is probably the most obvious question ever. I mean, Canadian Stampede, without a doubt. For a 2-hour in your house, fucking awesome. 4 matches on the main card. And they were all at least very good. I mean, you had Mankind, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, Great Sasuke and Taka Michinoku, Undertaker versus Vader, and of course the classic main event. Classic main event of Hart Foundation versus Team Austin, and then top 5 wrestlers. Just gonna go through this. Right, so obviously not the in-ring work. Well, actually, no, number 5 I'll go with Macho Man Randy Savage. Fucking awesome year for him. I mean, he really was. I mean, breakout year. He's probably had his best year in WCW. That heel turn, tremendous feud with DDP. Some great matches on pay-per-view. And he was still in his mid-40s and he was still wrestling as well as he ever had. Number 4, this is not about ring work or fucking out like that, but gotta be Hollywood Hogan. I mean, what a great year he had. I mean, yeah, he didn't have any really good matches, but plenty of memorable stuff. Like he had a big feud with Roddy Piper, the Nitro where he lost the title to Lex Luger and won it back, teamed with Dennis Rodman, obviously the build up to Starrcade and all that. So yeah, number 3, and he's only number 3 because of his absences. I mean, if this guy had been around all year, he'd probably be number 1, and that's Shawn Michaels. I mean, obviously, he went through January, winning the title back, lost his smile, was gone for several months, well, not several months, 3 months, came back in May, him and Austin won the tag belts, then him and Austin had the match at King of the Ring, then he took off again after having that big fight with Bret in Hartford, came back in the summer, didn't start wrestling again until after SummerSlam, and then obviously after that, the whole DX thing started off, the whole feud of The Undertaker and all that. And it was the end of the year to do a champion. But honestly though, if he'd been around the entire year, I would say he'd definitely be number 1 for me. But he wasn't, and that's why he's number 3. Then number 2, Stone Cold Steve Austin. Amazing breakout year for him. He broke out a bit in 1996 with the Austin 316, then classic match with Bret at Survivor. But 1997 was the year Austin really exploded into a superstar. And obviously winning the Royal Rumble, Final Four, classic match with Bret at WrestleMania, the huge face turn, then getting up the card and all that. Then obviously 1998 he would take his spot as the king of the WWF, and then number one for me, perhaps being biased, I'm not going to lie about that, and that's Bret the Hitman Hart. Really fantastic year for me, for him, with the amazing heel turn, the match with Austin, the matches with Austin, and obviously the whole USA versus Canada thing, leading the Hart Foundation into Canadian Stampede, going on to get his 5th world title that year, because he won the title twice in 1997. He tied Hulk Hogan that year to be a 5-time WWF champion. Think about that, in 1997, becoming a 5-time world champion was a big deal. It's just kind of funny, like now you got John Cena's being a 16-time champion. Randy Orton's just won his 13th world title. Last year Triple H won his 14th. That's just a funny little thing, but that's just a funny little thing now about how right now, like back in 1997, being a 5-time champion was a big deal. And obviously it ended in a sour note with Montreal and leaving the WWF on bad terms and all that sort of thing. And then we got, what do you think Austin would have done for the rest of 1997 if he did not break his neck? So let's just book him in these pay-per-views. So you won't remember obviously, but when Austin got injured, not only was he an Intercontinental champion, him and Dude Love also had the World Wrestling Federation tag team titles. So for Ground Zero you could have booked Austin and Dude Love in that 4-way with Legion of Doom, Headbangers and Owen Hart and the British Bulldog. Then you could have done somewhere where Austin gets attacked and taken out of the match, and then the Headbangers go on to win the tag team titles without Austin getting pinned. And then, I don't know, Bad Blood. Maybe you could have had him and Farouk for the Intercontinental titles and a little mini feud. Or maybe Austin and Davey, possibly. Then obviously Survivor Series, you go back to where you left off, facing Owen Hart for the Intercontinental title, and then obviously after that, you just do what happened in real life, really. And then we got forcing the Undertaker title run from WrestleMania to SummerSlam. I already answered this early in the video, so obviously you probably heard that one. So then we've got, why is 1997 your personal favourite year? For many reasons, really. I just think obviously the wrestling landscape was so hot at the time. You had the WWF and WCW battling for the rating supremacy in the Monday Night War. It was just exciting stuff. And then after that, you had ECW was a great little third promotion. And obviously, if you remember, I've been a wrestling fan for like 5 years at this point. I was now 10-year-old, coming on 11, and so I was coming at the end of primary school now. So that's obviously a time where your life changes, and then you want something different. And then I'd grown up with a squeaky clean WWF, of the like very, very PG, very kid friendly, all that. And now when they revamped everything, so now obviously when they revamped things to Raw is War, then we're starting to get a bit more gritty with the Bret Hart and Austin rivalry, the whole Hart Foundation versus USA stuff. Obviously now they're incorporating realistic stuff like Mick Foley's interview with Jim Ross. They did a similar thing with Goldust and Jim Ross, where Goldust talked about being the son of Dusty Rhodes and all that. Was talking he was Dustin and all that. Then obviously the whole saga with the Undertaker Kane. It was just an exciting time, really exciting time. I feel like wrestling was starting to become edgy and cool again. And then obviously later on that year they morphed into the Attitude Era, then into 1998. But I always liked the successful WWF was in 1998, 1999. The whole groundwork was built in 1997 with Austin's rise, with the Bret Hart turn on the USA stuff, the start of DX, Kane and the Undertaker, starting to get more bloody battles like the Bret and Austin one at WrestleMania 13, like the first Hell in a Cell match. Yeah, and obviously the big change from the Monday Night Raw with the silly little RAW set, Big Raw's War set with the Titantron, with the Pyro. everything just looked better. Then obviously WCW had the NWO, Hollywood Hogan, the Crow Sting, the Cruiserweight division. So much stuff to like. And then ECW, you had Raven, you had Taz, you had Sabu, you had RVD, you had the whole ECW invading Raw. That was something I really should have mentioned when I was being asked about my memories before. That time ECW invaded Raw. This was the first time I'd ever heard of this little thing called ECW. This is like, what the hell? This is pretty cool. So yeah, for those reasons really. Now the last one's a good one, which I'll talk about in a few different angles. What if the Montreal Screwjob never happened? So we'll go over the theory. So we'll go for one angle. So we say the Montreal Screwjob never happened because Bret Hart never left. So let's suppose Vince didn't make Bret go to WCW. Bret stayed in the WWF. What would have happened then? I feel like, much as I love Bret Hart, obviously you know that, massive Bret Hart fan, I feel like Bret wasn't a great fit for the Attitude Era. I mean, much as I love the guy, I mean, God, I do love the guy, I really do. I hope that doesn't sound gay, but whatever. Yeah, Bret, I just feel like Bret would have been phased out a bit in the Attitude Era. Obviously, it was a youth movement, there was edgy characters, where Bret Hart was more of a traditional wrestling character. He wasn't really comfortable with some of the edgier sexual sides of the show, so I feel like he probably would have lost the title to Austin and then got phased down. But then we got from another angle. So suppose Bret had left, but he'd left in a nice way, how he wanted to. The Montreal Screwjob never happened, but Bret Hart went to WCW but he left the WWF with his head up held high, with a respectful send-off. I feel simply Bret would have came back as soon as his WCW contract expired. Really, in 2000. I mean, Bret would have been back in 2001. Hell, he may have even returned to the WWF sooner. I mean, I think because during his time with WCW, he signed an extension at some point during that. So I feel like maybe Bret would have came back a lot sooner. It would have been nice, so there would have been no bad blood in then. What if the Montreal Screwjob never happened for WWE side? The Mr. McMahon character would have eventually came about, but obviously this was a catalyst for it, wasn't it? Really, I mean, this obviously the real life thing of Bret screwing. No, sorry, don't just Vince screwing Bret and then Vince taking that and becoming a mega heel. I feel like he might have became a heel character eventually, but it would have been nowhere near as heated. And if the Austin McMahon feud never happened, maybe WWF doesn't get back into the ratings war. I mean, obviously I think WWF is improving, but clearly the Austin and Vince thing was the one driving the thing, making it all better. So if that didn't happen, and WWF didn't have a phenomenal turnaround in 1998, where would the wrestling business be now, type thing? Because obviously I foresee all the same problems in WCW happening regardless, but if the WWF doesn't improve either, then could be very interesting wrestling business now. Because obviously the WWF was coming back, but I think the Montreal Screwjob and Vince becoming Mr. McMahon was the kick up the backside it needed. And another one actually was interesting, because of Bret's big contract, would Vince have been able to afford Mike Tyson? Because obviously Vince paid Tyson about $3 million. Could he have afforded to do that if he wasn't still paying Bret Hart all the money he was paying him? Just an interesting one, really. So yeah, this is a good one. I like this Q&A. We got an hour and 34 minutes, so I will be doing another one again. So look out for that. I'm not sure when, but when I do the announcement, I'll do the announcement video like I normally do. So good questions here. And out for now, guys, and peace.